Hello friends, and welcome to our first lecture video for ED 638B. Hopefully you have responded to the introductory discussion board with a couple of ideas on what makes an effective reader. Through this little video we're going to be talking about that and what are the characteristics of an effective reader. And then we're also going to just take a quick little review of what the main reading comprehension strategies are and how they are best taught. So the effective readers, I'm sure you guys listed some really great ideas about what makes an effective reader, and I'm sure that one of the things that came to your mind is that a skilled effective reader is a fluent reader. We've all heard those students who are not fluent and who are very kind of herky-jerky when they read and stop and start and stumble, and we recognize them right away as readers who are not effective and who are in the process of becoming. So we know that skilled readers are going to be those readers who have mastered those basic decoding processes to the point where they are automatic and that they don't need to pay a lot of brain attention to just decoding the words. So their cognitive desktop, if you will, is freed up so that they can get the meaning of the text and they can work on understanding what the words mean because they're not working so hard to just figure out what the words are. Skilled readers are also strategic, so that means that they come to a text with a plan and they think about what is their purpose for reading the text, and they think about what kind of text is this in front of me. Is this a narrative text? Is this an informational text? Is this a chart? What am I looking at here? And they have certain expectations for a text based on exactly what kind of text that it is. Then as they're reading, they pay attention to whether they're comprehending, and they're aware when their comprehension leaves them, and they have strategies for fixing that up and for getting themselves back on track and for helping themselves to understand when they realize that they're not anymore. Skilled readers make connections when they read. These are readers who, as they're reading, they're thinking about how does this connect to what I already know? How does this connect to something I've experienced? How does this connect to something I learned in science class? They're always thinking, and they're always thinking about how what they're reading fits in with what they know from their prior knowledge or from things that they've learned. Skilled readers, of course, are motivated. Of course, we always think of the students who are those eager readers that they're going to be our effective readers. So the readers are motivated, and they are able to keep their attention on a task and on a reading assignment because they have come to an understanding that reading can be interesting and it can be informative and, dare we say, it can even be entertaining and fun. And then, of course, our skilled readers are our lifelong readers. There are students who don't balk at reading. They actually enjoy reading and they embrace a reading task. And if you think about yourself, you didn't hit a point when you graduated high school when you went, oh, okay, I'm done. I'm like the perfect reader now, because then you entered college. And when you got into college, the reading material was very different, and you had to develop skills to approach that reading material differently. And now that you're a teacher, those reading strategies are different yet again, because when you were in college, you were reading things that you needed to learn maybe for the moment so that you could get through a test. But now as a teacher, what you're reading to gain information that's going to help you in your practice and is going to help you hone your skills. So the reading now is even different. So reading is a never-ending pursuit, and our effective readers are our lifelong readers. So most importantly, our effective readers are our students who are thinkers. And we know that readers need their decoding skills. They have to be able to determine the words and get the print off the page. But then they also have to make that meaning, and they have to be thinking about what do those words mean and putting together a meaning and an understanding while they're reading. So it's kind of a hard concept for some of our kids to grasp because they think if they're just saying the words that they're reading, and we have to help them to understand that that's not true at all, that just saying the words is only half of the quotient, that they have to do the other half, and the other half is getting that understanding and getting that comprehension. So for these effective reading skills to take place, we have to have 4 conditions. So the students have to have a mindset that, as we said, that they have to know that reading is thinking, and they have to approach a text with a determination that they're going to make sense of that text and going to understand that text and going to gain some understanding out of it. They have to have sufficient background knowledge in what it is that they're going to be reading so that they can make those connections while they're reading. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to know everything that there is to know about a topic. Maybe they just know a little bit. They have a little something that they can grab onto and be able to make a connection in their brain. And then we as teachers have to know when we're giving them a text that they will have absolutely zero experience with, we have to try to help them out and give them a little bit of information to help them have just a little bit in their schema that they can grab onto when they're reading. They have to be familiar with the type of text that they're reading and be able to understand how the author has organized ideas. So they know if they're reading a newspaper article that the who, what, when, where, why, how is going to be in the opening paragraphs, and then the rest of the article is going to be expounding upon that. And that comes with expertise. And of course, they also have to be able to identify almost all the words and not identify them just saying them, but also knowing what the words mean and how the words are being used. So, of course, our goal as educators is to develop these wonderful, independent, strategically lifelong readers. A huge task on our plate. But what we know is that we can teach them some reading strategies, and that the reading strategies will help them become these lifelong learners. And our course that we're going to be indulging in the next couple weeks is going to be exploring a whole bunch of different techniques to teach students some of these reading strategies that they can have under their belt that will help them with reading. So, if you've never heard of the National Reading Panel, let me just tell you about it very, very briefly. Back in 2000, a group of all kinds of reading experts were convened and were brought together by the federal government. And their charge was to examine every reading research project, or every reading research article that they could come across, and to evaluate all of them and to look for commonalities in what has been proven to be effective practice in teaching students how to read. So the National Reading Panel came out with this huge report in 2000, and what the report said basically was that an effective reading program has to have 5 components. And the 5 major components are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and text comprehension instruction. And within that report, they specifically mentioned the teaching of reading strategies. So since 2000, many other researchers have come on board and have agreed that yes, that's very true. Harvey and Goodvis, if you're familiar with them, it's Stephanie Harvey and Anne Goodvis. They have written books, Strategies That Work, and many others. They also authored the Comprehension Toolkit that a lot of us use for reading instruction. But anyway, here's a quote from them. And they say, there's substantial evidence that explicit comprehension instruction improves students' understanding of texts that they read in school. When researchers explicitly taught kids these comprehension fostering strategies, kids not only learned to apply the strategies they were taught, but the instruction had positive effect on students' general comprehension as well. So proof that teaching reading comprehension and reading comprehension strategies is going to be beneficial for kids. So when we're talking about the strategies, what in the world are we talking about? So here's a list, and hopefully they don't look surprising to you. Hopefully you're aware that these are some of the skills that we need to teach students to be effective readers. So building the background knowledge, teaching them to question, to visualize, to infer, to be able to determine importance and summarize and synthesize, and of course to monitor their comprehension as they're reading. What we do know is that this strategy instruction is most effective when it's explicit and when it's systematic. And I love this quote by Jeffrey Wilhelm, "Good reading requires good teaching." No kidding. And hopefully that's not a surprise to any of you that there is no worksheet out there that's going to teach a child how to read. They need a good teacher. And I'm sure that's all of you, and that's why you're here. But now when teachers are teaching these reading strategies, they do have to keep in mind that their end goal is comprehension of the text. Their end goal is not the strategy. For example, you're not going to end a lesson and say, what I really wanted to do today was to teach my students how to visualize. You're going to say, what I really wanted to do today was to help my students comprehend this text using visualization to help them with the comprehension. So we want to make sure that the strategies don't become our focus, that teaching comprehension is our focus, and that the strategies are a vehicle that we use to get there. And you can see it is about teaching kids to use strategies purposefully, to read any text for any reason, and to walk away from their reading experiences with new understanding that may generate still more learning. So we want them also to not only be successful with using the reading strategies to comprehend, but to be able to transfer those strategies to whatever text they encounter. So what do we know about some good instructional practices for teaching the strategies? Well, I can't say it enough, and I could probably end the class right now if we only talked about Think Aloud. Because truly, Think Aloud is the single most effective strategy that we have in our arsenal of strategies for helping kids to understand thinking that's going to go into their text comprehension. So when we're thinking aloud, what we're simply doing is talking through what is happening in our heads and in our brains when we are reading. And it feels very odd, but we have got to show the kids how our brains work when we're reading, and we have to show them how the thinking happens, because the thinking through text is not a natural process. A lot of kids have to be shown how to do it, and the only way we can show them what's happening in our heads is by talking it out loud. And we have to remember that this has to be us talking, because we are the expert readers. So we have to show them what's happening in our heads, not let them interfere and interject. It has to be our thinking. So as we're thinking aloud, what we're doing is things like sharing the authentic inner conversation, the voices in our heads, what's going on in our heads as we're reading. We're going to show them how we activate and connect our background knowledge to what we're reading. We show them the questions that are occurring to us as we're reading, questions that are going to be answered in the text, or questions that we're just wondering about, things that have come up for us as we've been reading. We can certainly share our inferences that we're making, and very importantly, explain how we arrived at them. Sorry. We can verbalize confusing points where we're kind of not sure what we've read, and demonstrate how we use those fix-up strategies. We can also certainly demonstrate when we lose our comprehension, or we lose our focus, and what we do to get ourselves back on track. We can show them how we sort and sift information to determine important ideas. Any skill that we want them to practice and become better at, we have to talk it through and say it out loud for them, so that then what they'll do is hopefully they will copy what we have done. We also know that the gradual release model is very effective in teaching our reading strategies. And with the gradual release model, we're going to start with that teacher modeling, where the teacher's going to explain the strategy and then model how to use it. And the Think Aloud is, again, that single most important strategy that we have for that modeling piece, for showing the kids how the strategy works for us and how we use it in our brains. Then, with the guided practice piece, the teacher's going to work with the entire class, and now the kids are going to be able to interject their comments, and they're going to work through text together, trying to apply whatever strategy is being taught, and having a discussion. And the teacher's going to scaffold the kids through. Then, hopefully, they'll move into some collaborative practice, meaning that the teacher will kind of step back, and the students will have time to work together and to be able to work with a partner or maybe a small group to use the strategies and be able to bounce things off of each other. And then finally, the independent practice piece, where students are expected to practice and apply the strategies on their own. And this can get you into the assessment piece, where you can take a look at the individual students and see, well, how are they doing with whatever strategy it was that you've taught. And then, to be effective, you're going to want the students to apply the strategies in authentic reading situations, meaning that the students aren't only going to use whatever strategy that you taught with just whatever particular text you were using to teach it, but they're going to see that strategy and use that strategy over and over and over and over again in different genres that they encounter, in different contexts, and in different disciplines. That's very important across different classes, that they see that reading is reading, and the strategies that work in one text are going to work for another text. Now, one thing that's a very simple but yet very effective strategy with teaching reading strategies is to make your walls work for you and to make anchor charts and to create little posters or little reminders of things that students need to be doing while they're reading. So, for example, this one is a better example of a visualizing strategy. What do we mean when we're talking about visualizing, and how does it work, and what's happening, and how do we use that strategy? It's really important to keep these visible for the students because you can keep referring to them over and over again to help them to see that these are strategies that apply in many different situations and not just in one text that we did in October and now we've moved on. But it's something that keeps coming up over and over again. This is something I love about elementary classrooms. You guys are so much better at doing anchor charts than we are in the secondary classroom, and that's something that we're definitely working on in Baltimore County, getting much better at this, especially in our reading intervention classes. So at this point, that was our quick little information about what makes an effective reader and about reading strategy instruction. And now what you're going to do is there's one other little brief video. I think you're going to like it. Just a quick little thing on the reading strategies. And then there's a little discussion board prompt after that second video for you just to respond to this information. And remember, this is just that 1 or 2 sentence response. You only have to respond once. And then after that, you'll move on to your assigned reading for the week. So I hope you've enjoyed this first lecture video and the information, and that it's going to be helpful to you. And I will see you soon for the next module.